Hello, Rebecca. Thank you for coming to talk with me today in your
I'm
special form.
in my special new form, which I'm very excited to have made. Maybe we should, in one of the lectures, break down how people can make one of these extraordinary characters for themselves.
That is true. That's a good idea because it's so simple and like there's all these free resources and it's so fun.
It's so fun. But yeah, so this is my form, and I guess this lecture series or this particular lecture, we're going to talk together
Mm.
on narrative as worlding and how that constructs alternate realities. But I figured, I mean, maybe you want to start by saying, because there's this whole tension around the word world building as opposed to worlding. So maybe we could just start there actually.
Yeah, well, I think partially I wanted to mention why I want to talk about this, and that kind of relates to this tension in between the two things. And one of them is that I feel like, well, like when the word building boom started in the art world, like I don't know, 2 to 3 years ago or something. I kind of feel like that's when it was. It suddenly became this big word that like every digital artist or adjacent artist started using. And then I was just so baffled at the time because I was like, but what does this mean? Like
Yeah.
actually, materially, what are you building a word? Or like, I don't know, like what's in this? Yeah, I was just really confused and annoyed. And then I discovered this whole like word building versus wording thing.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, because they are
and
significantly different, right?
yeah, because I think in my heart I always felt like what word building actually is to me is actually what wording refers to. Um, and I guess a simple way to put it is, well, there's different ways of putting it, I guess. And then I think we both have it in a reference as this blog post by David Blandy on his Substack blog that's kind of about the differences. And then how word building can often feel like, I don't know, just like piling on a bunch of information and then building this like static thing. And then like, that's
Mm.
it, done, word closed off, built. Whereas like wording is more like an active process, it's always happening and that like the word is being built as the actions are happening within it, and it's kind of like this permeable shifting landscape that
Yeah.
is being built by the actions of people or beings or non-people or various things that happen inside the word.
Yeah, it's a much
And
more
yeah.
inclusive word, I guess, but there's also something that David mentions in his blog post is that world building has these connotations of imposition, of whether
Mm,
that's a structure or law or a set of realities. Whereas, yeah, as you said, worlding is an active process.
yeah, and it's kind of like a top-down versus like a bottom-up thing. It's kind of, yeah, I don't know, like word building can be like so like totalitarian and then like I don't know, everything is fixed and then everything is imposed and unshakable rules, whereas like wording is something like you start with like a very small thing and then the word kind of blossoms out from it.
Yeah, yeah. And we've also got things in here that talk around mostly to do with tabletop roleplay, which I think we will come on to a little bit in this talk.
Mm,
But yeah, it might be worth also bringing in this idea of like the consistency of world building, and from the things that I've maybe seen in the digital art world, when someone is saying that they are world building, it's kind of like, well, they're kind of just not inherently, but they're also just, they're making something that does feel very static. And that's again kind of, I mean, there's obviously legacies with this within this word of colonial power and what it means to take over a continent and to remove its peoples and its culture. But in the sense of the art world and of art making, I think most often, I mean, we saw it a lot during the pandemic. I think this is when this word became very popular. Was because people were kind of annoyed with the reality that they lived in. So why not build a new world? But then obviously
Indeed.
that gives questions of why should you be allowed to do that? How can you even think like that? How can you think that you possess the power or the knowledge or whatever to even imagine a new world when there are so many people that can't? But yeah, we've made some notes here as well, and Haraway is also mentioned here in terms of science fiction, like with the storytelling and fact telling. So it's this patterning of possible worlds and possible times, and that's something that I really take from your work, Petra, and other people as well. It's this idea of possibility within world making, worlding.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, because at its heart, the process should be something with a lot of plasticity, and then like being able to change parts and then see how those parts that have been changed affect the rest of the word, so to speak. And then there's this kind of, I don't know, like generative power or this like sort of storytelling that kind of weaves back into the word that you live in, like the material reality around you.
Yeah.
Sort of,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I think, well, for this, what we're not going to go into, which I think is quite important to mention, just because this word is quite politically charged, I suppose. So yeah, we're not going to go into the context of history, so referring to processes of how humans have shaped and reshaped the world through their actions and interactions. We're not going to go into like diverse global landscapes that we see today and anything to do with colonialism. I think for us, we're interested more, at least in this lecture, talking around worlding as a narrative structure.
Yes, yeah, I think so. And also it's like, I don't know, like the history is so massive, it's kind of impossible to cover it in like one comprehensive lecture.
So
also, it's interesting because this is, I just wanted to mention that this is one of the first things that I kind of became fascinated with when I was at art school and then kind of slowly becoming an artist. This idea that like storytelling being interwoven with just like real life as we are, and then how like, I mean, that's a very simple thing. And then often, I don't know, people talk about like a mediated reality where like it's like, I don't know, like deep technology stuff, and then the stuff that you encounter through the tech affects your real life. But like just generally speaking, like fiction and stories have like affected people for hundreds of years. And then that's a kind of word building. Like, I don't know, you read a book that like has a certain story, and then it kind of affects how you think about your real life and how you construct the story of your real life that you tell yourself through your actions with other people, or like, I don't know, you recount your day before you go to bed and you kind of tell yourself this narrative of what has happened and what that means in the context of your life to that point, and the context of your interests and other words that you're interacting with at the time. And I just find it very interesting as a process that we're all kind of engaged in to certain extents. Some people more consciously than others.
Yeah, and I think just the source of where that comes from, like it doesn't have to be like this monumental seminal book by some guy, I don't know, like Deleuze. We were talking a lot about Deleuze previously.
Yep.
But yeah, it doesn't have to be like, it can be reality TV, it can be, I don't know, it can be anywhere, right?
Yes, yeah, like the sources are kind of all encompassing and so diverse.
But I suppose to bring it back to what you were saying about how people have told stories for thousands of years, it might be worth just hinting a little bit at the history of storytelling in various different areas. So I was doing a bit of research on the history of storytelling with early humans and tribes that still exist today in various different forms. But the way that this kind of storytelling intertwines with the beginning of myth-making and mythology. So the earliest forms of storytelling were usually oral, because people couldn't necessarily read or write in the way that we can. And they were combined with gestures and expressions. So that was really interesting to think about if I'm thinking in the realm of games, because this is a very performative act. It's a very theatrical act, I suppose, the way that stories were once told. And they often, I guess, had these shared motifs and themes. And I guess what we're talking about here are fairy tales, folklores, legends, fables that are passed down orally through generations. And what they aimed to do then was to teach lessons, to explain the world, and actually just also to entertain. So some archaeologists, I found, believed that rock art may have served as the first form of storytelling for many ancient cultures. So, like cave painting, these kinds of things, anything that you could make a mark with. So, essentially, just mark making. And yeah, there's this really famous depiction of a pig with human like figures interacting with it that was found in Indonesia. And people think it dates back over 51,000 years. And obviously, other examples are these cave paintings in Altamira and Lascaux, which have these other depictions of animals. And that kind of made me think as well, like, why in so many forms of early storytelling or mark making do we see these animals? Because we also see them in Egyptian hieroglyphs and these kinds of things. It made me kind of think, well, are they trying to depict them to get a sense of other sentient beings, or was there a different relationship with animals? Was it kind of this idea of kin and, you know?
Yeah, I wonder, like, if there was like, I mean, like, if I wonder if there was like a strong sense of like the human species versus the non-human species, and whether it may have been more like, oh, these other living beings that, well, look very different from us, but we're all alive at the same time, kind of. And also, it's interesting of like all the mythical animals that like
Yeah.
show up in these stories. Kind of, I don't know, just think about these like legendary beings.
Yeah, yeah. Um, some other things I found, like in indigenous storytelling, so in the Quechua community of Peru and also the Stolo community in Canada, these are all tribes that still exist. They predominantly use storytelling to teach and learn about identity and how to have good moral and social values. Another thing for the Quechua community was that there was no separation between adults and children. So stories exist for everybody, and you kind of take what you take from them depending on your experience, which I really like.
I
I think
quite love
that's
that.
great.
Yes, that's how it should be. I think it's kind of, yeah, it is kind of bizarre how, you know, like storytelling and like imagined stories are like thought of largely as like a thing for young people, and then when you're an adult, you either stop engaging with them or you engage with them in a different way with more of a distance between you and like the wonder of the story,
Yeah,
sort of.
yeah,
Even though that's not the case of how it should be.
yeah. I mean, there's obviously many more tribes and many more kinds of visual sort of storytelling languages, I suppose, that have come out of human history. But I just thought those were some interesting ones just to touch on. Um, I want to talk a little bit more about the history of storytelling in cinema and games. So I was doing a bit of research and I found that the first interactive narrative game, so like a text adventurer, was called Colossal Cave Adventure, and from
I think I heard the
1976.
title before.
Yeah, it's a
And I guess that
pretty.
was like, was that on like a computer
Yes,
kind
that
of
was a
thing? Yeah,
computer.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I guess here I'm talking more about digital games, I
Yeah, yeah,
suppose.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so the way that it referenced an actual cave system in Kentucky, and was actually a faithful reproduction of this cave called the Bedquilt Cave. I quite liked how these spaces were realistically made within a game setting. I think that seemed quite interesting, especially for that time and especially for the kind of game that it was as well. It could have been anything, but they chose to replicate this existing cave. And then I was thinking a bit about D&D and how some people say it's like the first tabletop roleplay game, but I was asking myself, like, what other games from previously from history might have had a narrative driven element to them. And I came across the Roman Ludi Romani, so Roman games. And I think a lot of people think about these as having just chariot races or gladiator battles, but actually they were storytelling devices,
Mm.
because they often included theatrical performances and like these more story-based entertainment systems rather than just blood and gore and death.
Yeah.
So I found that quite
Yeah.
interesting.
Oh.
And
Also, I feel like
then
it's kind of such like it's a very rich statement to say that D&D is the first tabletop RPG. Like, I think that's just like, that's impossible. I
yeah,
mean, I think people have played games in many different complex ways throughout time, all over the place. Like, even a simple card game could have a story imposed on it. Like, for example, I was playing this card game that I think is called, it may be called the Monarchs, I think. You can buy like a nice little deck, but it's just, ultimately it's played with a normal set of playing cards, and then all the cards with like faces and aces and stuff, or like the royalty, and then you're trying to like kind of overthrow them with the numbered cards. And then if you buy the official game, they have little illustrations on them, so you have like little animal knights and stuff, so you really feel like, but you can play it with an empty set of cards. And then like that's a storytelling thing already happening around just a deck of like unillustrated cards. So I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
this
Well,
sort of, yeah.
yeah,
And
I
also I
guess
feel
it
like
is a
just a
big
claim that
statement.
like, I don't know. Also just a claim of like from the D&D side that is the first tabletop role playing game is kind of like representative of like how I think D&D at large kind of approaches like D&D, not the practice but the, I don't know, like the company, like that like kind of trademarked this like way of experience, and then word, it's very like top down and intense hierarchy inspired by some questionable approaches to race and values and, I don't know, hybridity. I think it kind of like it's kind of symptomatic of the like strange top-down approach that kind of seems to have a chokehold on people's imagination, even though you could imagine so many different words in so many different ways. But somehow, I don't know, like
Yeah,
D&D has become this blueprint, but like it does not have to be the blueprint.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I kind of questioned that when I came across it, but yeah, I figured you might have some things to say about that. So I'm interested to hear about what this game was that used this card deck. What did you say it was called?
I think it's called the Monarchs. I'm gonna
The Monarchs.
uh, Monarch uh, Clash Monarch. Just looking this up quickly. Uh, maybe it had a different name. I will ask my friend who played this, and
Okay,
then
it will
maybe we
be
can
in
insert
it.
the information
Yeah,
later. But
yeah.
it's a
Look
card
here for
game
an
that you
insert.
can, yeah, but you can play it with the official deck, which has really adorable illustrations on it, of like, I don't know, like different numbers being different levels of knighthood, and like, I don't know, and they're all little animals, but you can just play it with a numbered normal card deck.
So I just want to bring in a couple of board games here, and thinking about how. So these are from sort of in the Mesopotamia, ancient Mesopotamia, so 4,000, 5,000 years ago. The oldest playable board game is said to be the game of Ur or Yor, and it's kind of like you just move pieces from one end of the board to the other. But I was thinking, like, even though that doesn't sound like it has a story to it, I can almost sense that there would have been a storytelling narrative to this game played by people of Mesopotamia, right? Because
Yeah,
we can't really imagine how people would have interacted with each other, but if you take away, I don't know, social media, if you take away books, if you take away everything that we kind of use to understand stories, then what you're left with is a group of people. And I would imagine that at every opportune moment they would have been telling stories, or just as we saw in the tribes, as a way to kind of understand the world and to understand themselves. So I
yeah,
thought
I
that
think so.
was
And even just like, even with this game, if it's just like about moving a little piece from one end to the other, like even just coming up with like, what is this piece that we are moving? Is it like a horse pulled cart? Is it someone on a, well, not a bicycle, I guess they maybe didn't have bikes in Mesopotamia, but like, is it someone running? I don't know. Is it
yeah.
a person on a horse? Is it just pigs running really fast? even
Yeah.
that's a form of like fragmented storytelling. And also, it made me think of this kind of unrelated game. It's called Cryptid, and it's about looking for a cryptid with like a group of scientists, and then everyone's kind of trying to negotiate information and try to find the cryptid first. But the in the premise of the game, it asks you to collectively decide what the cryptid is that you're looking for. It doesn't really tell you what you're looking for. Also, it doesn't really matter in terms of gameplay, but it's kind of a fun aspect before the game starts to be like, okay, what is this cryptid that we are looking for? Is it Bigfoot? Is it the owl with the copper penis, who is a significant cryptid in Hungarian lore? Which I find quite funny. Apparently, I thought this was like a joke, but apparently it's a real thing from. I don't know if you've heard of like the Baba Yaga kind of Slavic folk tales of like the old witch with like a big nose who is kind of sinister. It's meant to be like her male counterpart, the owl with the copper penis.
Interesting.
I'm not sure how that's meant to be like a dichotomy, but that's something.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. There's I was watching a video of like I don't remember what part of the world it was, but this sort of folklore that had been told of the sun, some sun god and some animal god that created the world, and basically it was like the sky and the land, and the pig was like. I'm actually not going to talk about it because I can't remember that well what I read, but.
But actually, this is a very good way to think about storytelling, is that I think often with these like oral histories and just like storytelling in general, like so much of it changes based on your like fragmented memories of the story.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, I don't know, someone told the story to you at some point, and then you remember it, and then you recount it to someone else. But part of it probably changes because of the context of the day, or like how you're as a person, or maybe you didn't like parts of the story and you rewrite it in your head, or maybe you just don't remember.
Yeah.
It's kind of like retelling a dream to someone. You sort of, what you make up about it is usually like actually divorced from what the dream was in your head, because you can't really retain those memories necessarily. And that's kind of like a sort of evolving storytelling. And I think that's also within the wording process, like how the word kind of continuously shift with how the story keeps shifting.
Yeah, definitely. I think to move on to early cinema, there's this thing called cantastoria, which is a kind of storytelling that uses images shown alongside either singing or shadow puppetry or whatever. And I think that's quite interesting because obviously this is much later. This is like 16th century Italy. But the prayers and other kind of stories would be sung with the presence of something else to back them up. So a scroll, or I don't know, some other kind of imagery that really sort of punctuates the storytelling. And I think that to me is quite interesting, because that's kind of how I mean, if I imagine a university lecture, there's always slides. People have slide presentations to go with what they're saying. So this is kind of like a very early. It predates cinema, but PowerPoint. Yeah, it's the 16th
PowerPoint
century.
should be cinema.
Yeah.
I had a student once who was making animations within PowerPoint because they
cool.
they didn't know how to use other software, and I just thought that is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, that's right up my street. Kind of misusing software.
Yes, like such an unexpected way. I've never heard of someone doing that.
Yeah, that's cool. But just to quickly.
Actually, this. Sorry.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Your mentioning of like shadow play in cinema made me think of how of kamishibai from Japan, which is kind of like, it translates to paper plate, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I think, well, I just quickly tried to look it up, and well, it has like a complex history, but it seems it became kind of its most common form in the 20th century, unsure when, but it was definitely a thing in the 1930s apparently. And it's kind of like, it was often these like traveling people who would tell the stories, and then they would have like a wooden box with like a little diorama paper theater set inside them, and then they would like, I don't know, move around the pieces. Like, I don't know, you have this wooden box frame, sort of like a theater set, but it's really small. And then the little things go inside, and then you move them around when the character moves, and then they tell stories, often like common, like, I don't know, legends and folk tales, but I guess sometimes They would be their own stories that they make up, or like they would alter these stories, and then that's kind of seen as like a precursor to animation in Japan, particularly because of how the movements that they use in the komishibai with all the like different distinct layers reflects on a lot of how Japanese animation was constructed, which is kind of interesting. And then also it made me
Yeah,
think of once in a language class, I had a Chinese classmate who talked about these specific kind of like paper dolls, but they were really complex that they used in her, like the specific part of China that she was from. I think possibly in the north, I'm unsure, to kind of tell stories. And I think often it would be like a shadow play, like there would be a screen and then they would move the puppet behind the screen. But I think that was also a very old standing thing. And I think they had like really big, long winters. So I feel like she mentioned that was kind of like a winter thing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I guess by candlelight in the winter or something.
Yeah. And it also makes me think of those cave paintings that you mentioned that were connected to storytelling. It makes me wonder whether they did the cave art and then later talked about it, or I wonder if the cave art was produced as they were explaining something in the present.
Interesting.
Like, I don't know,
Yeah, so it's
recounting like a story of hunting, and then they're just like, oh, and then I saw this rotund four-legged creature, and then they're just like, what is this?
yes.
We've never seen a pig before, and then they would draw an image like, oh, this is me, and then this is the pig next to me, so you can see the size.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if they. I also wonder if they were done in like as a solitary activity, or if it was a group thing, or yeah, I wonder. I think
It
that's
could be quite interesting if you imagine some people hunting in a forest, and then you're going after this beast, and you don't know what the beast is, but then you can like see little like fragments of it as you're chasing it through the forest, and then later with your friends you try to like draw an image of the creature that you saw based on your like collective memories of it. That's quite interesting. That could
Yeah.
make a good board game structure
That
somehow.
could actually to draw something that you've only ever seen once before. I mean, can you imagine that? I cannot imagine that. I feel like because of the way that information is, I feel like we've all seen everything once, at least.
Yeah,
Maybe
Yeah,
that's
it's kind
maybe
of-
that's glib to say, but like I can't imagine seeing a pig and not knowing what a pig is, or
yeah, it's
cattle.
kind of yeah. I feel like some time ago I did see an animal that I think I haven't seen before, and I was like, "This is such a novel feeling. This does not happen to you very often." Sometimes it
think-
happens that like for example, when I first saw how cashew nuts grow. Well, when I first learned that cashew nuts have a whole cashew fruit that I've never heard of,
Yeah.
and I first heard of it in my late 20s, that felt like such a mind-blowing experience of like, oh, to be able to discover a new fruit at this age.
I mean, I think a lot of that, like if I think about deep sea, like the very deep sea,
Oh yeah,
there's
I don't
there's
want to
still
know
so
what
much
goes
of
on in
that.
there.
Yeah.
It's best if I don't know, I think. Even though I
yeah.
love the wonder.
They're just very strange things that I'm sure that there are lots of folklore tales about, for sure. Like, I mean, I know that there are sort of Mexican or sort of Southern American stories of like water dwellers and spirits that live in the water, but I think they're mostly considered to be evil spirits. But I wonder
Yeah.
if that's because they're unknown, that they inherently become evil.
I think possibly, yes. And also, I guess because I would also assume that because humans can't breathe underwater, it's like you both don't know these creatures, but you also literally die if you go into their realm for too long. I kind of feel like maybe that affects how they are seen.
I
There's also
wonder-
lots of like evil sea creatures in like Japanese lore and Japanese folklore, which well makes sense. There's so much of the sea.
Maybe this is a good moment to move on to the ethics of worlding.
Yeah.
So yeah, the ethics of worlding. What's your stance on this?
I wonder, I always get a bit confused by this, and then it's sort of, I think, I don't know, I think ethics is like a broad category. I think the bit that kind of interests me is some of it is kind of like the ethics of the art word kind of co-opting this term of like wording slash word building that has historically been kind of a practice that is most consciously engaged with through various subcultures, and often these subcultures are formed by people at various stages of oppression or public ridicule.
Mm.
And it kind of feels like when I don't know, the big fancy people take up this word, it kind of feels a bit like, now you're talking about this? I've been in this for years. And it's kind of like the same thing of like, with all the early 2000s fashion coming back and being cool. And then I see people wearing the big denim shorts. And then when I wore those shorts when I was 12, I was frumpy and unacceptable and bullied. And then now is the most stylish thing. It's kind of like a very similar. I mean, that's a very banal example, but it's kind of like a very similar feeling of just like,
I totally feel
oh,
you
so
with that
now
though.
this is valuable. It's just like I see,
Yeah.
like, oh, now this has value. I see.
Yeah, now that it's the second time around, like, yeah, that's super interesting actually. How these things kind of were once ridiculed but now are accepted because I guess they are more valuable because of, I don't know, capital. I guess fashion has moved on. I'm not really sure, but maybe that links into what you were saying about D&D, like this kind of commercialization of gaming that's actually been around for so long. And how dare they say that they're the first tabletop roleplay game when there's been like
Yeah,
literal people in like 6000 BC, not on a table admittedly, but still storytelling and using props.
yeah. It's kind of, it made me think of the thing. There was this recent film that came out called Grand Theft Hamlet, in which some theater people did like a restaging of Hamlet inside GTA,
Yeah.
GTA Online, I think. And it
Yeah.
was, I think it was a good film. It was really interesting. And also, I love Hamlet. I went through a really strong Hamlet phase in high school. So I had a good time. But also, they just kept saying things like, no one has ever done this before. And it felt just so frustrating because if they did one single YouTube search to see if the nerds have been role playing in video games before and doing
Yeah.
complex improv and theater productions, they would have found that like this
Yeah.
has been going on for decades.
Yeah, it's very
And it kind
base
of
level
it was a
research,
similar
right?
moment of just like, oh man, just one YouTube search. So it's
Yeah.
like this is a kind of like an ethical thing that interests me personally. And then the other ethical thing is to do with like stuff like how a lot of like the word building and the arts kind of goes on, where like things are built in like either Unity or Unreal, and these come with like this massive asset store where you can get all these assets that were made by various different people. And then one thing that I find interesting is like often this is not disclosed what is used to build these words, like where the assets come from, and then to kind of think about how these assets are extracted, and then the kind of overarching economy of how these are produced, who makes them, who makes money off them, and then how they get used, and then what it means to like build a word from these strange modular pre-made elements, and then whether that is
Yeah.
actually building a word or if you're just building something that looks like a word, sure, but like, is there
Yeah.
anything in it that came from your like deep consideration and not just like picking up something that I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, like, to think about who owns these assets as well, because obviously, if we're speaking in terms of digital artists creating characters or worlds or games, they're probably going to be using Unreal or Unity or Sketchfab, and these, I think I can't remember who it was that bought them out recently, but there was a big thing where assets were kind of, they're all kind of homogenized now, they're all kind of conglomerated into this like bigger company, so then essentially everything looks the same. And you know, you've also got these things like mega scans,
Ah,
and this is
yeah.
actually what makes Unreal interesting to me. It's like the objects are modeled at such detail. The up close, the object detail is apparent, but when you zoom out, it reduces the load. So there's this kind of like sort of inner workings of mechanisms within these props that tell these stories in game worlds or whatever. Like I quite like these kind of undefinable or these systems that are kind of not super visible. but yeah, in terms of like big companies that own these assets, I think that's also interesting because I mean, this is probably quite harsh to say, but it reminds me of like these sort of, well, big tech kind of taking over and taking ownership of things, and then what do we own? Like if you made an object, if you 3D scanned something and you put it into software, like where's your IP there? Does the company take that object and then anyone else can download it? Is it open source like that, or is there kind of like more of a nefarious reasoning behind you adding your own asset? So that kind of thing is interesting to me. Just the kind of the allocation of assets and who owns them and who gets to use them, I suppose.
Yeah. And then also even just this like flattening of assets where like everything kind of looks the same. It's sort of like, and then I don't know, you take this like language that was given to you and then you build a word from this language, and then it's going to look a certain way because the language is already pre-made to look a certain way. So it's like, even if you say that like you can build anything you want in Unity, you're not starting from zero. You have your preconceptions of like what the word looks like, especially in like a game environment. And then B, you have these assets that you will likely be using, and those already have like a strong agenda about what's valuable to put in a word, what should be detailed, what should not be detailed, how they should be arranged, and what should be looked at, and how you should navigate through this word. And it's kind of, I think somewhere in the notes I put this quote from a book that's called Short Cinema from Evan Calder Williams, and I've actually been rereading, because often I like type up my favorite parts of a book and then I have it in a Google document, and I was rereading it as I was looking for this quote, and it's just so poignant and so on it in terms of like, I don't know, mixing with the digital and the complex relationships we have with these things. And he kind of talks about open world games, and how like even this idea of like, oh, it's an open world game, you can do anything, you can be whatever you want. But the quote goes that we must note that the freedom to halt at any moment in the midst of an open world game doesn't change the way that the game and its producers have very particular ideas about what is worth looking at and what will be allowed to appear. And I just think this is something very important to consider, that like just because theoretically you can go flower picking in Skyrim or Oblivion, which I enjoyed quite a lot, it's like it still has like a very strong agenda in like what goes where and what has value and what doesn't have value. And then even in things like, there's a very good video essay by this YouTuber called Verily Bishi, who makes these video essays about various forms of subcultures, I guess. And she has one about I guess it's like kind of about like character creation, but it was motivated by Baldur's Gate 3, which came out recently, and it's very popular for and kind of viral for its really intense character creator. And it even has gimmicks such as like a slider that controls how big the bulge in your pants is. Like
I've
I don't know,
heard about
kind of
this.
like penis customization, this sort of stuff, and how was kind of lauded as like, I don't know, the epitome, the pinnacle of queer character making. And then Verily talks about how the game still kind of makes you select your gender, I think. And it's like, sure, you can control the bulge so that you can have boobs and then a bulge in your underwear, but if you select to play as a woman, you cannot become as tall as a male character can be tall. So it's kind of like, and then kind of went through a lot of games that sort of add these fun gimmicks of like, you can play as a male character, but you can have boobs, but then they still operate within dichotomies. And then because of just how it's like, how the character created is made, they add these fun gimmicks at the end as a kind of afterthought for, I don't know, queer credibility. But then it doesn't actually, like, why not just make a single character creator where you can have all the tallnesses? Like, yeah. And then she talks about how you can't be like a tall woman. Seems to be something that breaks all of these games that are supposedly about the ultimate freedom of self-expression.
Well, it makes me think about VTube, Vroid Studio that we've used to create these characters. What's interesting to me is that you do have to select gender, and there's only 2 genders to select from, but then once you get into the process of making, anything that's gender related becomes available to you. So you could have like a very feminine eye, but then a very masculine jaw. I mean, I'm doing air quotes here because I don't also prescribe to that idea of like masculine or feminine, whatever. But I think it's interesting that all of these options become available to you, and therefore you can make a character that is not gender specific, and I kind of really love that about it. And I was wondering about, in relation to your work, how important that is to have a character that looks like you, that has your hair, but that also within the same software you could create a very short, a very different character to yourself. Like, what does that do to storytelling when these options are available to you and when they're not available to you?
Yeah, I always wonder. I think I kind of have like a strange relationship with myself in that, I don't know, I kind of don't necessarily feel like the person that looks like me is also myself at the same time. I think partially I started using my avatar that looks like me because I was not very good at making things up. And then I think sometimes I find it hard to make up a character from scratch that is me, but I think I find it easier to identify with something if I'm like given a character from like, I don't know, I like this TV show, I like this character, I don't know, this character reminds me of myself in some ways, and then kind of recreating that character in a different environment feels easier to do than kind of make up something from scratch, because I'm not sure if I feel like I need to make myself up from scratch. Like, kind of, it reminds me of this thing where once I think I was interviewed for something on the occasion of an exhibition, and the person was interested in like gender in many ways. And well, I have my own complex things about gender, but then the person asked me how it feels to have like an avatar who is a woman. And then I kind of had a sort of internal breakdown moment because I never ever considered my avatar to have a gender identity, like full stop. No gender, because I was like, this creature lives in a being with like no other humans to look at them. And then like I was using she her pronouns at the time because I don't know, I don't care that deeply about pronouns for myself because my native language doesn't have gendered third person pronouns. So obviously I prefer they them. It feels nicer. But if it's she her, I'm just like, all of this is made up. And then I kind of use it as a default, and I was so shocked and kind of felt violated to discover that people were gendering this character that in my opinion had like nothing to do with gender. It's kind of like this idea of you can customize your character in any way that you want, but you still have to click a male or female box at the beginning. Like, that is nonsensical. Like, gender does not exist in this virtual body. Like, there's no, even if you're like a weird biologist, like, that's not a thing. It does not have to be a thing.
Yeah, I think...
and I kind of found it shocking that people were taking these structures onto a realm that does not need to have these structures in any form.
I wonder if it, it's probably due to a lot of different things, but I'm thinking about the way that classic stories are told. Like, if I think about Romeo and Juliet, or if I think about, I don't know, Wuthering Heights, or I don't know, all of these kinds of stories, there's a very clear definition of what is male and what is female. And I wonder if this will change, where actually the identity of a character in a story just kind of isn't really necessary anymore. Like, I was reading a Cory Doctorow book recently called Someone Comes to Town, Someone Leaves Town, and in it there's a kind of family setup, but the dad figure is a mountain. And one of the brothers is an island, and well, the mum is a washing machine, so I wonder if that's actually gendered, stereotypically gendered. But it felt interesting to read something where they were objects, and to me, objects don't have a gender. I know that in some languages, like French, I think objects have male or female kind of words around them, but I don't know, that was kind of interesting to me because it really reframed how I saw these characters, because the dad, the mum, and this particular brother, they didn't speak, but they communicated through, like, if the mountain was cold, the dad was kind of upset, or if the washing machine was kind of like powered on and shaking, it was the mum trying to communicate with them. So yeah, I wonder how people will perceive gender, especially for the next few generations, when it's become such a big thing to basically not misgender somebody, but to also allow for multiple genders to be available on forms, for example. You know, how will that change storytelling? I hope for
Yeah,
I hope for the better.
I really hope so. Yeah. Also, it's kind of the whole language aspect of it makes me very interested because it's kind of like I read somewhere that like obviously the language you speak shapes how you see the word. A very basic statement, and then like an anecdote that's often used for this is that like in some languages there's like some like Eskimo languages I think there's like multiple words for white because of like because they see so much snow, there's just so many shades of white to them, and there's like different words for all these different whites, I think like 26 or something like that, and like they see those as separate distinct colors. Like it's not just like, oh, this is white and that's a different white, like they are different colors. And on a related note, there's two words for red in Hungarian, and like those are different colors to me, they're both red in English. It's
Really?
confusing, but like there's a distinct difference. And in the similar, I think I was listening to this in a podcast, and I think they said that according to some studies, supposedly, whether your language has either like gender for like objects and or gendered third person pronouns, it makes like a developing child become aware of gender as a concept much earlier than in a language that doesn't have gendered third person pronouns. And I was also thinking of a friend who has a young child, and he's been reading The Lord of the Rings to her in English. And she's been very sad because there's like no female characters because Tolkien.
Yeah.
So she's been a bit annoyed finding out the gender of certain characters when the pronouns come in. But well, she loved it anyway and got really into it and kind of made up her own thing in quite wild ways, as like 5-year-olds do. But I think they're
Yeah.
going to read the Silmarillion to her next, which is kind of a major feat. But they're going to read it to her in Estonian, the other language that she speaks, and that one doesn't have gendered pronouns. So they were thinking like, oh, I bet she'll be very happy because she can just like assume whatever gender. I mean, I'm sure that like the words
Interesting.
woman and man will come up in the story, but like it will not be inherent in like just the description of like he did this, she did that. You
Yeah.
can just make an
Yeah.
ungendered statement, which is really nice. I think third person gender pronouns are just a wild thing to have generally. Like why do you have to do that? You don't have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. 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 Totally. Um, So I think I want to take this a little bit more towards the internet as worlding, or worlding through the internet. This is something that I think is very close to both of our hearts in professional settings, but also in personal deep dives and rabbit holes of chaotic internet threads.
Yep.
So, yeah, I guess the internet for us, for lots of other people, is not just a way to communicate information. It's this fabric of nested or overlapping worlds, as I see them. Comment sections, subcultures, fandoms, different communities. And these worlds emerge organically, which I think goes back to the idea of maybe like tribal oral storytelling, like this kind of organic nature of how things are passed down or how things come to be. And of course, on the internet, these stories are often shaped by platform architectures, but they're also shaped by shared rituals, insider language, and collective memory about certain things. And online spaces here, I think, function more as micro worlds within larger worlds, with their own rules, their own norms, their own aesthetics and myths, etc. So I wonder, yeah, I wonder, because you can definitely speak to fandom. Fandom is such a big part of your personality, but also a big part of your work. I mean, all of the,
Yes, yeah.
yeah,
It's kind of yeah, it's interesting. I think I have. Well, one thing I want to mention that you made me think of when you in the previous section is the person who runs the Know Your Meme website. Can't remember his name, but I subscribe to his Substack, and he like sends out little essays about meme culture, the internet, and then you mentioned how like a lot of these like smaller words are like shaped by like the architecture of the platforms that allow them, and then I mean we increasingly have a problem of like these like massive platforms kind of eating up everything that we do on the internet, even though things could be done in very different ways. But it's kind of like everything must be on the platforms because
Yeah.
big tech and everything else. And then how I think that's like a very daunting experience, and it's kind of, I don't know, like anxiety inducing to live there. But because you kind of like think of like Twitter now as this like ultimate like weird fascist space, but then you can have like countercultures there. And then in this Know Your Meme Substack post, the guy wrote this essay that was called something like Skibby Dialectics. It was about Skibbity Toilet. I will admit I don't fully
Amazing.
understand what Skibbity Toilet is, but from this I learned it was kind of talking about like a dialectical approach to Skibbity Toilet. It was actually a really good reading of it and very interesting, but talked a bit about how like Skibbity Toilet is like, I don't know, an original existed, and then like people make their own versions and then put it on YouTube, and then there's like thousands of interpretations of the Skibbity lore. And then how for the spread of Skibbity Toilet, like YouTube as a platform was necessary, but the heart and the ethics of the Skibbity Toilet community are ultimately against this kind of top-down imposed thing that like YouTube is doing.
Of
But it's kind of like
course.
this, like about this symbiotic relationship of like YouTube needs Skibbity Toilet and Skibbity Toilet needs YouTube, but they are like oppositional forces.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then the essay was kind of about, you know, this phenomenon and how this exists, and this kind of makes me think about how like platforms can be misappropriated by smaller subcultures within it.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
also interesting to think about how these big platforms that kind of they feel like they own everything just because they want to, they kind of they need the user base, and the user base kind of is very possibly operating in very different ways to the platforms.
Yeah.
And it's more like an empowering take, I guess, than thinking about that, like, I don't know, these tech companies are choking us, which they are choking us, but
It
it's not like
makes.
an entirely hopeless black and white situation.
Yeah. I think just to, on your Skibbity Toilet, I was in a games shop where I come from a few months ago. I think it was just before Christmas, and there's now a Skibbity Toilet game. I
Whoa.
don't know if it's a
Whoa.
board game. I think it might just be
Board
a toilet that I don't really know. I just saw it and I was just I had to leave the shop because
life is full of
that's
possibility.
peak internet to me. How this thing started as probably just a prank, some like kid or some adult, I don't know, post. I don't even know where it came from, if I'm quite honest, but it's just that pipeline of rare niche meme on the internet to commercialized product being sold in stores across the globe. Like, very
Yeah.
interesting.
Like, that's
But
a very interesting recent phenomenon, because I feel like back in the day you could have like a massive meme, and well, they had like longer lifespans, but then they didn't necessarily become a product,
well, I what about
even
Nyan
if they were.
Cat?
Ah,
Nyan
yeah, that's
Cat.
true.
But I think
Yeah.
that's maybe more to do with the
Maybe on
fact
the
that it was a cat and it's cute and I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that was on like the cusp of when things started becoming products. I feel like.
But
I
to
wonder.
yeah, to go back to what you were saying about platform capitalism, I guess, and how platforms own stuff. There's this great book by a writer called Ruby Justice Thelot called An Archaeology of Checkpoints. And this is essentially the story of this YouTube commentary on this one particular video. Now, obviously, when you upload something to YouTube, YouTube can just take it down, they can demonetize it, they can kind of do what they want with it. But there was this one particular video, I think it was like early YouTube, maybe the early 2000s, that had this vibrant comment section of people treating it like it was a kind of check-in. So there was this thing where you would check in and be like, hi, I'm here, this is what's happening to me, I'm based in London, I'm having a shit time this week, things aren't going so well. And then 10 years later you'd check back in and you'd say, hi, it's me again, I'm still in London but things are looking up. So it was like this almost therapy session for people, and there were thousands and thousands of comments. So people were really treating the comment section as, I guess, a pseudo therapist, but also just a way to talk about themselves, because TikTok wasn't around then, so it wasn't like this immediate kind of main character thing of like putting yourself performatively on the internet. So these comments kind of shaped this memory world that held a much deeper meaning than the actual content itself. But Ruby's book talks about how this video was deleted, and with it, obviously, this decade-long, maybe even more than a decade-long worth of stories disappeared overnight.
Yeah, I find it really like terrifying and sad.
Yeah, because I
Just
know
like
that
things.
this is not the first one of this that's happened, right? Like this happens so often. Not
Yeah,
just with YouTube comments, but like
all sorts
servers
of
that go
websites going
down.
down. Yeah.
Exactly.
Actually, there was this like I was very active on a blogging platform when I was 13. That was as part of this competition run by like a Hungarian youth magazine, and I was super active on there, and then talked to so many people. And then when the competition ended, they deleted the website. And then it was just this really sad moment of just like suddenly losing touch with all these people that I have been sort of like talking to for a good number of months. So they felt like significant enough that I was like interested in their lives. I was wanted to talk to them, and then it's just all gone. And then there was like no other way to contact them because I didn't know their real names, or I didn't know other places where they may be located. It's kind of interesting. And also it makes me think of something that I'm quite worried about in this like contemporary internet, with how we have it like of like I love Discord as a concept. It's kind of like it's like forums in the good old day. It works in a very similar way, but I'm made so sad that Discord is private. Like partially it's great that it's private, but that it's like it's not searchable, and there's like so much knowledge on
Yeah.
Discord in these like gated communities, and then like I can search a forum from 2004 and then find bits of like lore about how people were living and what they were thinking, or like various bits of information that pertain to very niche things. But like you cannot search a Discord because it's not public, and I just find this kind of, I don't know, heart wrenching in
Yeah,
many
it's
ways.
what is the point of gatekeeping this kind of knowledge, really? And also, yeah, just this idea of like being invited into a group, it just makes me think about being at school and not being let into like the group that you wanted to be in or whatever. It's just kind of not especially generous at all.
Yeah, it sort of makes sense because you can kind of both use it as a group chat for like a smaller group, but it can be this
Yeah.
like huge big thing. It would be nice if there was like an option to like open it, as in like I don't know, like you tick a box and then you can make your Discord searchable, because I feel like there's so many communities with like massive resources that it would be really good. But also it kind of relates to, I'm not sure, I was reading something or listening to something that talked about kind of like privacy and then the internet, and how these big platforms make you be on the internet. And then just like even things like if I watch a Twitch stream, or like if I stream something on Twitch to, I don't know, do a little talk like this to other artists and stuff, like to be able to comment on it, you need to have a Twitch account. And then to have a Twitch account, you need to have an email that you then need to like confirm, and then you need to put in your phone number for two-factor identification. And sure, it's very nice because I don't know, it's like less trolls, less violence, but then also it's just like just the fact that like to have a presence and the ability to say something on any website, it kind of requires this massive effort from your real
Yeah.
person. Like you need to have an account on everything, and it kind
Yeah.
of talks about how it's kind of like 4chan and similar image boards, which are often places where people of interesting ideologies congregate. So it's not necessarily positive communities, but it's one of the last places where you can talk to people
Yeah.
without putting in your email address.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it's just that you can no longer just like type your name into a forum box and then send a comment. You have to have an account and log in and verify, and then it's all connected to your real email. If you don't want that, you have to make fake emails, and then like and it's just like this like massive faff, and it's really hard to talk to people in this like anonymous way that I think it's a very important thing to do on the internet. It's kind of like not everything has to be connected to your government ID. And I think a lot of the anonymous stuff can be really like, there can be a lot of vitriol and hatred. So I do think this is like a dangerous situation, because people can be very mean when there's no face attached to them. But also
But
I
what
think it's
about the
very
people
important to,
that
Yeah.
Yeah, what about the people that don't want to be mean? What about the people that just want to
Yes.
connect
Yeah.
with others?
That's my other thing. It's just like, I don't know, the hateful people are very loud, but I think there's more people that just want to connect to other people without having to upload a picture of their passport to Facebook so they can be let into their account.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's kind. Yeah.
Well, speaking of 4chan, also Reddit, I'd like to come to this idea of internet folklore. So, in folklore studies, narrative as worlding refers to how storytelling doesn't just recount events, but instead builds this immersive, self sustaining world with its own logic, its own rules, and participants. And on Reddit and 4chan, this obviously happens constantly, but in this decentralized, chaotic, and emergent way. So thinking about internet folklore, thing like subreddits like Glitch in the Matrix or No Sleep, the comment section here, I mean, the comment section becomes almost like a worlding anchors, and I think I'm thinking about like how 4chan has generated these entire mythologies within comment sections and within posts as well, where people don't just read and move on, they read and interpret and rewrite and add to these stories. So things like The Smiling Man, which is this horrific story about this encounter that this person has on a nighttime walk with this nefarious person who's kind of dancing a waltz and then suddenly like at the speed of light is kind of like all up in his grill, like smiling this weird cartoonish smile. So there's loads of stories like this. I mean, The Smiling Man I think is one of the more famous ones, but then you've got like things like alternate reality games as well. And creepypastas, which are fundamentally narrative as worlding. So Cicada 3301, which you've probably heard of, Petra, but it was one of the first sort of internet-based scavenger hunt, internet-based puzzles that appeared in 2012. And was believed to be a recruitment tool for a highly intelligent group. So maybe the CIA, maybe not. But essentially, things would get posted to 4chan or other sort of message boards, giving people who wanted to take part like clues of how to solve particular mysteries, and then once they solved one, they would then get a clue to the next. And actually, I think to this day, Cicada 3301 has never been completed by anybody. Like people still don't really know who set it up. Like it's this very strange internet phenomenon that people still make stories about.
Yeah, and like that's I think that's like a good way to also like illustrate the kind of wording slash word building experience. Like if this was like a word building thing, I don't know, like the framework would all be provided, and then if everything is provided to you, why would you make up stories about it? The story is already complete. But it's like a kind of wording way full of like mysteries and holes. Then you get to fill in the gaps and the holes with others, and then the story just keeps evolving, and still no one knows the solution to this weird puzzle, and then where it came from.
I think there's also, in the same way that Discord is kind of exclusionary, I think often these can also be exclusionary. Like I think about maybe telling an older person like, oh, have you heard about Slender Man or Momo? And they'd be like, I literally don't know what you're talking about. So I think it's this idea of like, if you know, you know, if you're in, you're in. Which I think only just exacerbates this idea of like the worlding that takes place in these areas.
Yeah, I guess it's like the more
you want to be
insular it
part.
goes. Yeah, because if it's exclusionary, then you can like, if you know what's excluded, then it's really easy to define what's included, and if you have a good definition of what's included, then it feels more concrete somehow. Not in like a positive or negative way. It's just kind of like a phenomenon, I suppose. And then you want to be part of it. You want to be in with the group. You want to make jokes with them. You want to use the shared language.
Yeah. But I do really love that about these kind of like, especially in No Sleep or, you know, these kind of like creepypastas. Someone will be like, oh, I'm trying to remember this creepypasta from like, I don't know, when I was a teenager and it's kind of about this, and then someone in the comment section will be like, oh, it might be this story, and then they'll sort of relay this
Mm.
particular story, and then someone else will be like, yeah, I think it is that, but I remember it being like this. And then there's kind of like no hierarchy of stories in that way. Like they all become collectively written, but also collectively dispersed. And so what I really love is that, I mean, maybe not like the more famous ones, but the more kind of niche creepypastas, is that actually no one really knows the origin. And I love that. I love that kind of the origin gets lost, and whatever story you come across, whichever one you find, is your interpretation. But there's also like a million other alternative endings to it, and I love that.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I find it really powerful. It kind of your example of like recalling the stories and then someone is like, oh no, but like I know it differently. It made me think of this card game called Shithead. I think it has different names in different places, but I find it really interesting that this is a game in Hungary, and I heard of like Estonian people playing it. It's a thing in the UK. I'm just like, how did this become a worldwide phenomenon, and why is it called Shithead in so many places? Where did it come from? And then B, it's really fun when you play with like people from different cultures or a new group of people, because then often there's like a little like discrepancy in the rules and like what a certain card does. Like I don't know, it's like for like the way I know it is like, for example, the number 4 is kind of like a transparent card, but then in other places it does a very different thing, and it's kind of like, but it's the same game. And I just wonder where this started, why it's called Shithead, and then I just love this like strange spread of it where like everyone knows it, but everyone knows it a bit differently. And then I was talking to someone about Uno, and then they were mentioning about house rules, and then I get really irritated by people having house rules for Uno because Uno has a rule book. And then it's like, I don't know, the rule book exists, but I mean, you're free to do whatever you want. The house rules are actually good. I have some house rules for Battlestar Galactica because there's some game elements that I think don't work very smoothly. But
Yeah.
it made me think of like how like Shithead is able to be so permeable and mutable because it has no rule book. Like the rule book is spoken at the table, and then someone remembers it, and then recounts the game again. But it's like there's not really a rule book to refer to. You can Google, but there isn't like an official little booklet.
Yeah, again, it reminds me of folklore tales, myths, mythologies, fairy tales, how these things are kind of passed down, and one particular fairy tale to your family might be different to somebody else's family's telling the same story. Like this brings me back to what we were saying at the beginning, and what David Blandy said in his blog post, is this idea of the possibility of within worlding. It's the idea of the possibility, right? Many different endings, many different ways of seeing something, and storytelling should not be gatekept. There shouldn't really be a hierarchy to it, and I think that's kind of what
Yeah.
we've been talking about, really.
Yeah, I think so. It's just, yeah, the potential for a story to be retold, and there's like no limitations on how many times a story can be retold. And then the different iterations that come from these retellings. And there's not really like one correct way for a way to exist. And also like so much of it is, this is like a social thing, either done literally in conjunction with others, like in a role-playing game when you're literally creating the story together as you're playing it, or if you're like recounting a story with same people in the room, or like on the video chat or whatever, or in a forum, but even if it's like you constructing a story in your head, like other people are likely present in it because we live in a society. That's maybe that's not a very eloquent way of saying it, but it's kind of like it's always a social thing, because other people's stories, whether you get them from a book in like a solo format, or whether you get them literally from other people telling you things, like it's always present, and it's these like multiple forces coming together. And I think that's the important part of the whole like word building / wording thing. Like it's the narrative element and the potential for multiple narratives to be born out of these environments.
Yeah, like we said, not top down, but bottom up.
Yes. Yeah.